Yeah.
Okay, good evening. Okay, so to quote Monty Python, now for something completely different. I am part of Tokenika, but I'll be talking about something that it's not strictly about EOS, but it's about something that could be done on EOS and probably should be done on EOS. So I will start with introducing this new offshoot of Tokenika, which is a new brand called Sygnet. And Sygnet is about a new approach to digital identity. So it took us several days to define what we want to do with what Sygnet is about. So we've come up with this little sentence, and this will be the subject of this presentation. So we have users, and we want users to have full control over digital identity, and we claim that it's something that requires a radical change regarding how identity works online. So I'll try to explain what we mean by full control and what this radical change is about and why bootstrapping is the crucial part, the biggest challenge of this change. So I will start with a question. How many of you are familiar with this concept of self-sovereign identity? So this is what I expected. So it's not many, because it's not mainstream. It's like it's just emerging, even though it has a couple of years already. But it's not something that it's popular right now, but it's becoming a hot topic. But before we discuss this self-sovereign bit, let's talk about digital identity, just to define what we mean. And identity is a tricky word because it's both narrow and very broad. So it's related to personal data, but basically we could define it as any data that is stored on a computer system that refers to any external agent, and this agent can be a physical person or a company or even a thing that belongs to either of those. And we can have several categories, like inherent attributes, accumulated attributes, and assigned attributes. So I think you can think about this concept like a digital persona as opposed to physical persona. So it's like your digital personality. So it's like, think of it as a very broad concept. Okay, so let's briefly discuss how digital identity works today. So basically, it's owned and controlled by third parties. So you just create an account with a service provider, and then you have access to this account, so you can contribute to this account, but actually you never control this account. So you are like a tenant. You are just renting some space. You can use the space, but actually it's not yours. So this is how it works today. All those accounts on Facebook, Google, and on other services works like this. So, but imagine what happens when technology advances and this digital persona becomes really, really important, maybe even more important than physical persona. So it's like a very dangerous situation that we are not owners of this very important part of our life. So now let's briefly discuss what we would like digital identity to be. So I've come up with 6 characteristics. So definitely we want digital identity to be untraceable. So different digital personas should be not connected. So if I'm a good driver, it has nothing to do with me being like member of a sports club. So user profiling should not be like default. It should require my consent. identity should be portable, so it's not logged into any particular service. It should be verifiable, so anyone can trust what I say about myself to be true. And it should be manageable. So it's like I should know who knows what about me. So it's like in the EU we have this GDPR legislation. And theoretically we should receive emails telling us which company knows what about us, but obviously it's like it's not really working because it's not manageable. And if you can make identity manageable, you can make it monetizable. And what I mean, because obviously personal data is already monetizable, but the point is we as the users are not involved in this process. It's going on behind our backs. So ideally, we should be the primary beneficiary of this monetization. And last but not least, it should be like a lifetime property. It should not be, nobody should be able to take away the digital identity for us. So it should be like property, like a physical property belonging to me, and nobody can take it away from me. Okay, so this brings us to the concept of self-sovereign identity. So I guess we already defined it. So it's like, it's an identity that works online and has all those 6 characteristics. Basically, this is the concept of self-sovereign identity. And the funny thing is that actually we make it like really working similar to offline identity. So for example, for offline identity, we have this. So we have like an ID card, and when I represent my ID card to anyone, nobody else knows about this, and also nobody can take it away from me. So even the government is not able to take it away from me. So it's like, so the offline identity has very useful characteristics, and those characteristics are made primary characteristics for self-sovereign identity. So this is similar to Dan Larimer's statement that he wants to make the apps working on EOS decentralized apps to make them indistinguishable from centralized apps. So this is a very bold statement, and I think this is equally bold statement that self-sovereign identity makes identity working online indistinguishable from working offline. And if you look at this from a different perspective, you can say that self-sovereign identity makes everybody involved really autonomous. So we are acting like, not like tenants renting a flat, but like landlords or landladies owning a flat. So I was trying to come up with a metaphor that illustrates this concept, and the best I could find is this picture. So obviously, hopefully you realize the metaphor. So you use a service. In this case, it's like watching a movie, and you arrive in your own vehicle. So you have your own private key. You have your own keys to your car, and you use the service, but you are pretty much autonomous. So another example is this. So it's like you can use a service, but you are pretty much autonomous. Okay, so very briefly, how self-sovereign identity work. It's quite complex, but I will make it really simple. Like I will simplify the whole process to 3 steps. So the first step, you need to create a secret. So a secret can be like, the formal name is a private key, but let call it a secret. So a secret is a long sequence of random characters. So and only you know the secret. So you are the only person who knows the secret. And then you attach some personal information to this secret. And then you ask somebody who is trustworthy to vet the veracity of this information. So you ask some entity that can be trusted in the external world to verify that what you are saying is true. And then this identity provider, because this entity, we call it identity provider, stamps this information with a cryptographic signature. And the important thing is that this signature only works in the context of the secret. So basically what this signature says that this information is true, but it only refers to the person or an entity that knows the secret. But the crucial thing is that you are not revealing the secret. So you only prove that you know the secret, you know the private key, but you are not supposed to reveal it to anyone, including the identity provider. And the last step is really simple. Oh, I forgot to tell you that the stamped information is called verifiable credential or verifiable claim. So then you use this verifiable credential and present it to anyone that wants to see it. So in this case, you will go to any service provider and you can verify yourself with this piece of information. So they can trust it as long as they trust the identity provider. So the important thing is the secret, the private key that protects the information. But it protects it in a very, very smart way, because anybody can access the information. The personal data is not a secret. The secret protects the information from being used outside of the person that knows the secret. So it's like we're connecting something that is known only to you with the information that will be used publicly to present yourself to service providers. So this is basically how it works. And we have those three actors. So we have this identity subject, so it's you. That's the verifiable credential is about something that concerns you. We have this identity provider that signs this verifiable credential and saying that the information is true. And then you have this identity consumer or service provider that wants to consume this information, that wants you to be a customer of their service, and then they need this information to be true, so they trust this identity provider. So we have just those three actors working together. And let's take a look at the value added for each of them. So for identity subject, so it's basically you, it's pretty simple. You have all the benefits that we mentioned at the beginning, but you need to take responsibility for the private key or the secret that protects this identity. For identity provider, it's even more simple. There are just benefits. This entity can monetize its reputation and its ability to vet information. And then you have this service provider or identity consumer, which has two benefits. It simplifies, it's very easy to start using a service because you do not have to sign up and go through the verification process. You are already verified. So you come to the service and you already have an account. You are already verified, so it's just a matter of opening an account. No verification is needed. So the onboarding process is really, really simple. And the other advantage is this entity is no longer responsible for data leaks. So things like this will no longer be an issue, because even if the data is stolen, it cannot be used to impersonate a user. It can have some marketing value, but nobody can pretend to be you using just this information in this new paradigm, because the the secret that protects the information is on the user side. So the hacker would have to hack each individual account to be able to impersonate any particular person. Okay, so it seems like a win-win situation for everyone involved. There are some trade-offs, obviously, because the identity subject needs to take responsibility for the private key, but I think the benefits are overwhelming. Also, a service provider no longer can keep the customers like hostage. It needs to like behave much more honestly. So, but overall, there are lots of benefits for every party involved. So, but the tricky thing is that it's very difficult to bootstrap this whole system, even though everybody seems to be happy, because the whole thing only works on a massive scale, because there is no point to have this digital identity if you are an identity subject, if there's no service provider who can respect this. And also there'll be no service provider accepting this new form of identity if there are no users who possess this kind of identity, and also there will be no service identity providers if there is no demand for this. So this whole notion of self-sovereign identity works only on a massive scale. It doesn't work like locally. So the bootstrapping problem really boils down to this problem: how to convince a very large number of people to keep and protect the private key when at the initial stage we cannot offer any immediate benefits. So it's like this is the actual problem. We need to convince people to do this, and we cannot offer any benefits in the beginning. So because otherwise the system looks like perfect. So we've come up with several ways to approach this problem. I will list just 4 of them, just to be brief. First, you can find a market niche and try to apply this self-sovereign identity thing just in one industry. For example, you can take a medical industry. So if you are a doctor and you want to change jobs, you need lots of certificates to prove your qualifications. So you need to get those certificates from the hospital you're currently working for, and then you need to offer them to your next employer. So this can be done like on paper. It can be done in a digital way, and it can be done like using this notion of verifiable credentials. But the problems here is that self-sovereign identity in this case doesn't offer you its power, because it works best when you have a whole wallet of identities and you can use them for different services. So this is when the whole thing becomes powerful. So the second option is what I call a Trojan horse strategy. So we can use self-sovereign identity for more generic solution, for example, like first or second factor authentication. So we can use the whole technology that powers self-sovereign identity, but use it initially for a different purpose. So we can utilize the thing that you could do second factor authentication by creating private keys on creating and holding private keys on mobile phones, and then use them for second factor authentication. The same private key then can be used then for building self-sovereign identity, for attaching information around this and going for this verifiable claims product. But the downside here is you have to compete on a very competitive market. So self-sovereign identity, the whole technology doesn't give you any edge in this case, because you are just using a different approach to achieve something that can be there are already solution in place. And the third approach is like something similar to Uber or PayPal, because if Uber wants to deploy its service in a new city, it has a similar problem. There are passengers and drivers, and there's no point to be a driver if there are no passengers, and there's no point to be a passenger if nobody wants to drive you. So what Uber does, it needs to pay one of the actors just for being there without offering any service, and then the whole thing is bootstrapping itself. So in this case, we could do this. We could just pay service providers for accepting new users using this new paradigm, but it's very costly because we would have to do it on a massive scale. So this requires definitely an ICO, and then we could just distribute tokens from the ICO and subsidize one of the actors to bootstrap the whole thing. And finally, the fourth solution is creating something viral, something just to let people play with this notion of self-sovereign identity without any initial usefulness. So we could just verify each other, and then gradually this game could turn into reality. And my personal favorite is arranging a lottery, so you could just ask people to start being verified, to start getting those verifiable claims proving their real-life identity, and we could distribute tokens from ICO just for the fact of being verified in this new way. So we could have like several thousand $US worth of tokens distributed every day just for the fact of using this technology. So, but again, it's a little bit like cheating, because we're not using actually the notion of self-sovereign identity. We're just preparing people to be ready for this self-sovereign identity to be used in the future. So to sum it up, I think it's self-sovereign identity is definitely the future, and it's really, because if we were to design it from scratch, definitely this is the solution to choose. And it's also a great use for blockchain. I didn't mention how blockchain is involved in the whole thing, but actually it's one of the few instances that I know of that blockchain is actually useful. It's the missing link between cryptography and a useful product. But as I mentioned, it's extremely difficult to bootstrap, because you have to engage not one, not two, but 3 different parties before the whole thing takes off. So it's extremely difficult, but probably it's doable. And finally, I would say it's really important, because as the technology becomes more and more ubiquitous, it's probably the only way to keep personal data getting out of control and keep stopping technology from becoming like totalitarian in nature. Because if our digital persona becomes more important than our physical persona, and if we're just tenants, if you are just not the owners of those digital personas, it will be very tempting to abuse this situation. And even if service providers don't do it, there'll be hackers who will be very interested in hacking a large number of people and then impersonating them. So probably this is the only way to go. Okay, so that's it from me. We'll be trying to build this. We'll probably start on EOS. And it's a long journey, but I think it's right now the technology is there, and what's not really solved is how to approach this bootstrapping process. So this game is open to everyone, and we are trying we'll be attempting to do something, like contribute some business intelligence into this problem. Okay, thank you.